"Make it quick, rancher. I won't scream," said the wounded Apache girl who was stuck under the canyon. Sam rode along the canyon, the sun beginning its slow descent behind the jagged cliffs that lined the path. The winds had picked up, sending loose rocks skittering across the dry earth. His horse, a strong, steady animal named Rusty, moved with a rhythm Sam had come to trust after years of working this land. The ranch was a long way from town, and out here it was just him and the land, the quiet stretching on for miles. He was checking the fence lines, making sure the cattle were safe and that there were no loose wires to repair. The land was quiet, too quiet. It always bothered Sam a bit when the desert was still, but he didn't pay it much mind today. His thoughts were on the cattle, on the work that still needed doing, and the upcoming winter that was never far from a rancher's mind. The wind howled louder, the sound carrying across the canyon, and that's when Sam heard something. It wasn't the usual whistle of the wind or the soft crunch of his horse's hooves. This was something different. A cry, a faint sound, like someone in pain. At first he thought it might be the wind playing tricks, but then he heard it again, louder this time, unmistakable. His heart quickened and he urged Rusty forward, riding toward the sound. The canyon was narrow here, steep walls rising on both sides, and the ground was rough. Sam had been this way countless times before, but he had never heard anyone calling for help from this part of the canyon. He leaned forward in his saddle, scanning the rocky landscape for any sign of movement. Then he saw her. A young girl, no older than 16, was trapped beneath a large boulder that had fallen from the side of the canyon. She was lying on her back, her leg pinned under the rock, her face twisted in pain. Her clothes were torn, and dust covered her, but it was the look in her eyes that struck Sam most. She wasn't screaming or crying, but her eyes pleaded for help, and her breath came in ragged gasps. Without a second thought, Sam dismounted. He tied Rusty to a nearby rock, his movements quick and efficient. The girl's condition was bad. He could see that right away. She wasn't moving much, and her leg was badly crushed under the weight of the rock. But the thing that stood out the most was her eyes, strong, defiant, yet full of pain. There was something about her that made Sam pause. She wasn't begging. She wasn't pleading. She just waited, staring at him, as though she knew he had no choice but to help her. "Hey, hold on," Sam called out as he made his way over to her, kneeling beside the boulder. His voice was calm, though inside he was panicking. He wasn't sure how he was going to lift the rock by himself, but he had to try. The girl's breath came in sharp bursts, and she looked up at him, not with fear, but with something else. Anger? Resentment? He couldn't tell. Her lips barely parted as she spoke. "Make it quick, rancher. I won't scream," she said in a strained voice. Sam froze for a moment, his hands hovering over the rock. Her words hung in the air, a strange challenge in them. She didn't want to scream. She didn't want to show weakness. Sam knew that feeling. He'd seen it in the hardened men who came through the town trying to hide their pain behind a wall of silence. But this girl, this Apache girl, seemed different. She wasn't like the others he'd met, those who had been brought into town after a skirmish, bound and broken. There was pride in her eyes, even in the face of injury. Sam admired that strength, but it also made him uneasy. He had no idea who she was or why she was here, but she was in desperate need of help, and he couldn't just leave her. "You're going to be all right," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He wasn't sure she would be all right, but he had to try. He moved to position himself at the boulder's edge, carefully inspecting the best way to move it. He would need all his strength and some luck to do it. The girl watched him silently, her eyes following every movement he made. She didn't say anything more, but Sam could tell she was watching him closely, assessing whether he was capable of helping her. After what felt like an eternity, he braced himself and began pushing with all his might, the muscles in his arms straining, his boots digging into the dirt for traction. The boulder was heavy, and at first it didn't budge. Sam gritted his teeth and tried again, sweat beading on his forehead. After a few more moments of effort, the rock shifted. Slowly, it rolled off the girl's leg, leaving a small space between her and the earth beneath. She let out a small gasp of relief, but she didn't move. Sam quickly moved to her side, his heart pounding in his chest as he assessed the damage to her leg. It was bad, crushed in a way that would need immediate attention. There was no time to waste. "Don't move, all right?" he said, though it was clear she wasn't planning to move anytime soon. She simply nodded, her face still tight with pain, but no tears came. She bit her lip, probably to keep herself from screaming. Sam lifted her gently, carefully, cradling her like she was as delicate as glass. The desert sun beat down on them, but the air was still, making the heat feel even heavier. He could feel the girl's body trembling in his arms as he carried her back to his horse, her breath shallow. He didn't know what to make of her, who she was, where she came from, or how she ended up in this canyon, but he knew one thing for sure. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. He had no idea how this would end, but for now all he could do was get her back to the ranch and tend to her wounds, and once he got her there, he knew things would only get more complicated. Sam carefully set the girl down on the porch of his small ranch house, the wooden floor creaking beneath her weight. Her leg was still badly swollen and the bruising was starting to show around her ankle, but at least she was out of immediate danger. The ride back had been slow, the girl leaning heavily on him, her body pressed against his as he kept her steady on his horse. She had not spoken a word the entire time, her face a mask of quiet determination mixed with the undeniable signs of pain. Sam tied his horse to the nearby post and stepped inside, his mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. He had seen injuries like this before, but he had never treated someone from the Apache tribe. He wasn't sure how she would react to his help. What did it mean to her? Was she grateful or just too proud to show it? Sam didn't know. All he knew was that he had a duty to help, whether she accepted it or not. He took a deep breath and knelt beside her, gently lifting her leg to get a better look. The girl winced, but she didn't cry out. Her eyes never left him as he worked. Sam felt a mixture of respect and something else. Guilt, perhaps. Guilt for not knowing who she was or why she was here in the first place. Guilt because, even though he had helped her, he couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't want his help. Her silence was unnerving, but Sam didn't press her. He worked quickly to clean her wound, using a clean cloth to wipe away the dirt and blood. He could feel her stiffen every time his hands touched her skin, but she remained still, not moving, not complaining. He wondered if she was just too exhausted to speak, or if there was something deeper at play, something about her pride, her history, or her people. "Just a little longer," Sam said gently as he wrapped her leg in a bandage. He tried to sound reassuring, but his voice lacked the confidence he felt she needed to hear. It was hard for Sam to know what she needed. He had always been independent, taking care of his ranch and his own business. But this was different. She was different. When he finished, he sat down beside her, his gaze drifting to the small fire he had built outside. The crackling of the flames was the only sound between them. She still hadn't spoken. He could see the tension in her body, the way her shoulders were drawn tight, like she was ready to bolt at any moment. It was clear she didn't trust him completely. Not yet, anyway. Sam sighed and stood up, walking over to a nearby cabinet to fetch a cup of water. He returned and offered it to her, holding the cup just out of reach, waiting for her to take it. She hesitated for a moment, before her hand slowly reached out, taking the cup without a word. She drank deeply, her eyes focused on the water, as if it was the only thing that mattered in that moment. "You must be thirsty," Sam said, watching her closely. She didn't respond, but Sam wasn't expecting an answer. She had barely said anything since he found her in the canyon. He tried to imagine what was going through her mind, but it was impossible. She was like a closed book, one he had no idea how to open. After a long pause, he sat down across from her, keeping a respectful distance. The silence between them was heavy, and Sam found himself wondering what to say. But nothing came to mind. What could he say? She was an Apache, and he was a rancher. They had no common ground. Their worlds couldn't have been more different. "My name's Sam," he said after a while, breaking the silence. "Sam Jones. This is my place. I don't know who you are, but you're safe here. I'll take care of you until you're well enough to leave." She didn't respond, but her eyes flickered toward him for a brief moment. Sam wasn't sure what he had expected, but the lack of reaction stung. He was used to being alone out here, but something about this felt different. The girl, despite her pain, had a presence that seemed to fill the entire room. It wasn't fear, it was something else. A quiet strength, maybe even a kind of defiance. Sam shifted in his seat, rubbing the back of his neck. He felt awkward. He didn't know how to help her, or what to do next. But he couldn't just leave her out there, alone in the desert. He had to keep her safe, at least until she was well enough to make her own way. The girl finally looked up at him, her eyes steady. Sam felt the weight of her gaze, like she was sizing him up, judging him in a way that made him feel small. He had expected her to say something, but instead she simply asked, her voice low and quiet, "Why are you helping me?" Sam blinked, taken aback by the question. He hadn't expected her to speak, let alone ask such a direct question. He shifted in his seat, unsure of how to answer. What could he say? That he was just trying to be kind? That he had no idea what else to do? "I don't know," he said finally. "Maybe it's just the right thing to do." She didn't respond, but he could see the faintest flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't gratitude, at least, not the kind he was used to seeing. It was more like curiosity, or maybe suspicion. Sam couldn't tell, but he didn't expect her to be thankful. "Not yet." "I don't want to cause you trouble," Sam added, his voice quieter now. "I know things between settlers and the Apache haven't been easy, but you're hurt, and I couldn't just leave you out there." The girl's lips pressed together, and she nodded slightly, as if accepting what he had said. But she didn't offer any words of thanks, nor did she seem to expect anything in return. She simply watched him, her expression unreadable. Sam sat back, rubbing his tired eyes. This wasn't going to be easy. She was going to want to leave as soon as she could. He was certain of it. Apache or not, she wasn't going to stay with him forever. But for now, he had a chance to make sure she got better, to help her heal. He couldn't change everything that had come before, but he could make sure she didn't die alone in a canyon. He stood up and walked over to the door, looking out at the vast expanse of land stretching before him. The wind had died down, and the evening sky was filled with stars. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "I'll be outside," Sam said, his voice more certain now. "Let me know if you need anything." The girl didn't respond, but Sam didn't expect her to. He left her alone in the cabin, the quiet of the night settling in around him. As he stepped out into the cold air, he wondered just how much more of this strange situation he could take. There was something about the girl, something about her silence and strength that gnawed at him. But for now, all he could do was wait. He had to earn her trust, and that was going to take time. Days passed slowly at the ranch, each one blending into the next, but Sam couldn't shake the feeling that things were far from normal. The Apache girl, whose name he still didn't know, was making a slow recovery, though she remained distant and silent. Sam didn't push her to talk, respecting her space, but he couldn't help feeling that there was more to her silence than just pain. She didn't ask for much. She ate the simple meals Sam prepared for her, though she didn't seem to enjoy them. She accepted the water he offered without much gratitude, and she rarely spoke, her eyes always holding some sort of quiet, untold story. Sam couldn't help but wonder what lay beneath the surface of her defiance. Sam had seen enough of the Apache tribe to know that their people didn't trust outsiders. There had been skirmishes between settlers and the Apache, and the air between them had always been tense. But this girl, she was different. She was hurt, trapped in a place where she had no power, yet she held herself with the pride and strength of someone who had seen far more than a girl her age should have. Sam had watched her carefully over the past few days, noticing the small things, the way she seemed to stiffen at every sound, the way her eyes always scanned the horizon, like she was expecting something or someone to appear at any moment. One afternoon, after tending to the cattle, Sam returned to the cabin to find the girl sitting near the window, watching the sun set behind the hills. She was alone, a dark silhouette against the dimming sky. He had learned not to interrupt her moments of quiet reflection. But today, something was different. She seemed more at ease, or perhaps just less guarded. The tension in her shoulders had eased, and her breathing seemed less labored. Maybe it was the healing of her leg, or maybe it was something else. But Sam decided to take a chance. "I've been meaning to ask," Sam said, leaning against the doorframe. "What's your name?" She didn't look at him right away, and for a moment Sam thought she might not answer at all. But then, very quietly, she spoke. "Lena," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she were testing the sound of her own name in the air. "Lena," Sam repeated, letting the name settle between them. "That's a beautiful name." She didn't respond, but Sam saw the faintest flicker of something in her eyes, perhaps gratitude, or something more complicated, but it was gone before he could place it. "Why were you out there in the canyon?" Sam asked, his curiosity growing despite his best efforts to stay out of her business. "What happened?" Lena stiffened at the question, her gaze turning distant once again. She didn't answer right away, and Sam regretted asking, but he couldn't take it back. He'd seen the fear in her eyes when she'd been trapped, and it troubled him that she wouldn't share her story. He was used to people being guarded, but this girl, this Apache girl, seemed to hold the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Don't you want to know?" Sam pressed gently, his tone softer now. "What happened to you? Why were you out there?" Lena looked at him then, her eyes dark and full of something he couldn't read. Pain, yes, but also something else. She shook her head slowly, her mouth pressed into a thin line. "I don't want to talk about it," she said, the words cold but final. Sam understood that. He had known people in his life who kept their stories buried deep inside, unwilling to share the pain, and though he was curious, he could see that pushing her would only make things worse. "I understand," Sam said, stepping back from the doorframe. "You don't have to. I just want to make sure you're safe." Lena didn't say anything more, but Sam could see her watching him as he moved around the cabin, his mind still racing. He wanted to understand her better, to help her more. But how could he when she wouldn't open up to him? He didn't know what it was like to be part of the Apache, to live their life, to know the constant fight for survival that came with being part of that world. Over the next few days, Sam tried to offer her small comforts: a cup of tea after the sun went down, a blanket when the nights grew cold. But he could tell Lena wasn't ready to let down her guard. She stayed in her corner of the cabin most of the time, only leaving when it was necessary. Even then, she moved like a shadow, always keeping to herself, her back straight and her head held high. Sam couldn't help but admire her strength. There was no panic in her, no begging for mercy. She accepted her situation with a quiet resolve that Sam couldn't understand, but respected all the same. He had known many people in his life who had folded under pressure, but Lena was different. She seemed unbreakable. But Sam also wondered what lay beneath that hard exterior, what had caused her to be so strong and yet so silent. Was it just the way she had been raised? Or was there something more, a wound deeper than the one on her leg? As time went on, Sam began to notice other things about her. Small things, the way she always looked at the horizon when she stood outside, her eyes scanning the distance as if waiting for something or someone. She was always alert, always aware of her surroundings, and Sam realized that she wasn't just recovering from her injury. She was recovering from something much larger than that. He didn't know what it was, but he suspected it had to do with her past. One morning, after tending to the horses, Sam returned to the cabin to find Lena sitting at the small table, her hands resting in her lap. Her face was calm, but Sam noticed the way her fingers fidgeted, as if she were nervous about something. He walked in slowly, not wanting to startle her, and sat across from her. "You don't have to stay here forever," Sam said, trying again. "Once your leg's healed, you can leave." "I won't stop you." Lena's eyes flickered to him, and for the first time, Sam saw something like vulnerability in her gaze, but it disappeared just as quickly as it came, replaced by that same quiet strength. She nodded, but there was no smile, no words of gratitude. She was still a stranger to him, still someone he didn't fully understand, but Sam couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. "I know," Lena replied quietly, her voice almost too soft to hear. "I'm not here to stay." Sam didn't press her further. He could tell that this was a conversation she wasn't ready for, and he didn't want to force her into it. But he couldn't help but wonder what had brought her to this place in the first place. What had brought her to his door in the middle of nowhere, injured and alone? The rest of the day passed quietly, and Lena spent most of her time resting. Sam continued with his chores, tending to the land and taking care of the animals, but his mind kept drifting back to the girl inside his cabin. He wasn't sure why, but something about her was impossible to forget. As the sun set that evening, casting a golden light over the land, Sam sat outside, his thoughts still tangled in the mystery of the girl. He didn't know what the future held for either of them, but one thing was clear. Lena was not someone who would be easily forgotten. The days were getting warmer, and the land around the ranch was starting to show signs of spring. Sam spent most of his time outside, working on the ranch, fixing fences, and tending to the animals, while Lena stayed mostly inside, quietly resting and recovering. Sam noticed that the longer Lena stayed, the more distant she seemed. She had moments when she appeared lost in thought, her gaze distant, staring out the window as if watching something only she could see. It was as though she was always waiting for something, or maybe someone, but Sam wasn't sure what it was. One afternoon, Sam had just finished repairing a broken fence near the edge of the property when he saw Lena standing outside near the barn. She was looking out over the horizon, her posture still and steady, like she was deep in thought. Sam watched her for a moment, feeling the weight of the silence between them. He had noticed that she had started to leave the cabin more often, standing outside, as though she was drawn to the wide open land. It wasn't that she was seeking freedom, but rather a sense of being connected to something larger. It was the same way Sam felt when he was working the land. It gave him a sense of purpose, a place where he belonged. He decided to approach her, walking slowly across the dry grass until he stood beside her, just a few feet away. Lena didn't turn to look at him, but Sam didn't mind. He wasn't expecting her to speak immediately. "You're feeling better," he said, his voice calm but gentle. It wasn't a question, but more of an observation. Lena nodded slowly, but she didn't say anything. Her eyes were fixed on the distant hills where the land met the sky. There was something peaceful about the way she stood, like she was grounded by the earth beneath her feet. Sam couldn't help but feel a sense of connection with her in that moment. "I've been thinking about your offer," Lena said quietly, breaking the silence. Her voice was softer than usual, like she was sharing something she hadn't said before. "You said I could leave once I was better." Sam didn't know how to respond at first. He hadn't expected her to bring it up. In fact, he had been avoiding the subject himself, not wanting to pressure her into making a decision before she was ready. He had a feeling that the day she left would come, but it was still difficult to face. He wasn't ready to say goodbye. "I meant it," Sam said after a pause, trying to keep his voice steady. "Once you're healed, you're free to go. But it's your decision. I'm not going to make you stay here if you don't want to." Lena turned to look at him then, her eyes soft but serious. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, something that made Sam's heart skip a beat. Was it hesitation? Regret? Or something else entirely? He couldn't quite tell. "I don't know where to go," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do next." Sam frowned slightly, not sure what to say. He hadn't expected that answer. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. You can stay here as long as you need to. I'm not rushing you." Lena looked away, her gaze drifting back to the horizon. She didn't speak for a long while, and Sam didn't press her. He knew better than to push her too hard. She had been through a lot, and whatever had brought her here, whatever had happened before, Sam didn't know the details. He only knew that she was strong, and that she had a certain way of holding herself as if she carried the weight of something heavy. After a long silence, Lena spoke again, her voice low but steady. "I was part of a small Apache tribe," she said, her words coming carefully, as if she had been weighing them for a long time. "We lived out in the mountains, away from the settlers. My father was the chief. We didn't have much, but we were content." Sam listened intently, his eyes focused on her face. He had never known much about the Apache people, except for the rumors and stories he had heard from others. Most of what he knew was shaped by fear. Fear of raids, of violence, of conflict. But Lena's words were different. She didn't speak with anger, but with a kind of quiet sadness, as though she was telling a story she had never shared with anyone before. "Then one day the soldiers came," Lena continued, her eyes lowering to the ground. "They attacked our village. My father tried to protect us, but it didn't work. My mother, she was taken, and I was forced to run. I couldn't stay. I couldn't save them." Sam's heart ached as he heard her words. He could see the pain in her eyes, and it was clear that she had suffered more than he could ever imagine. He had lived a relatively peaceful life on his ranch, isolated from the chaos of the world. But hearing Lena's story made him realize how little he truly understood about the struggles of others. "I ran as far as I could," she went on, her voice growing softer. "I thought I could find safety in the mountains, but the soldiers followed me. I couldn't stay there either. So I ended up in that canyon. I was trying to escape them, to hide. But then the rock fell, and I got stuck." Sam felt a surge of sympathy for her, mixed with frustration. He could hardly imagine what it had been like to live through such an ordeal. His own life had been hard at times, but nothing like what she had experienced. He could see now that Lena wasn't just an Apache girl. She was someone who had lost everything: her family, her home, and the life she had known. "I'm sorry," Sam said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know. I didn't know what you've been through." Lena gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "You couldn't know. You're a settler. You don't understand." There was no anger in her voice, just a quiet truth. Sam nodded slowly, understanding that she was right. He couldn't truly understand, but he wanted to. He wanted to know her pain, her story, so that he could be there for her in the way that she needed. Lena was silent for a long time, her eyes fixed on the distant hills again. Sam didn't interrupt. He just stood there, watching her, feeling the weight of the moment. He didn't know what the future held for either of them, but he felt something deep inside him, something that told him that this wasn't the end. Lena wasn't ready to leave yet, and neither was he ready to send her away. "Maybe I'll stay," Lena said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I need more time." Sam smiled softly, though it wasn't a smile of happiness. It was a smile of understanding, of acceptance. "You take all the time you need." The sun had set completely now, and the sky was full of stars. The air had cooled, and the night felt peaceful, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Sam didn't know what would happen next, but for now he was content to let things unfold as they would. Lena had shared a piece of herself with him, and in that moment he felt that maybe, just maybe, they were starting to understand each other.